Welcome to our next session of the EMI, which is the Economy, Markets and Investments. We did not do a January version because the budget is coming on February 1. So naturally, we will now focus today on the budget and its implications. But I guess all of you must be having a smile on the face because after many, many years, the budget has brought a cheer to the stock market. But let's look at it in a little bit of detail. So let me, without much delay, start off on my presentation. So as you can see here, right, I'm going to be first talking about our usual economy markets outlook before the budget. And at the end, we'll discuss the budget because you should understand the context in which the market is treating the budget this way. What were we all thinking as fund managers? I think it's important to understand. So as you can see, the globally, right, the post-COVID recovery is well entrenched, synchronizing strong macro, right, and with the vaccination proceeding very well, right, I think we'll see further escalation of the coverage under the vaccines. Internationally, the Brexit deal has been seen positively, and the US has seen a democratic sweep. So both houses of parliament are aligned with the Biden government, so they should be able to push through what they want to do. So the key overhangs on global trade and more fiscal stimulus the US needs, I think, are over. It's also liquidity is expected to continue, and they're expected to add $300 billion a month. So I think FII flows by and large across emerging markets, depending on where who, will be quite positive, right? So the twin deficit, however, the US is also having a massive fiscal deficit. I think it's about 20%. So it's going to weaken the dollar and strengthen the rupee, which is not very good for exports, but it's excellent for India's imports, right? So like I said, this is what it is. Commodities have seen strength, but not expected to spike as the Chinese credit cycle is moving close to its peak. So we expect the commodity cycle to grow gradually only. And then there are output gaps in all economies, there, which means what the demand and supply gap. So when that closes only, you'll see sharp rise in inflation, right? There's enough chance for more and more demand to be absorbed by the existing supply availability. That's what the output gap means. So while liquidity is driving earnings and multiples higher during the year, as far as we are concerned, stock selection will remain earnings dependent, right? So on the globe, the global growth has picked up much faster than expected. So that's one thing to remember, right? You see the pre-COVID glide path and the post-COVID, and the post-COVID has actually overtaken the pre-COVID expectation. So actually, contrary to market expectation, private sector risk appetite is better placed, and therefore global growth could witness further upside surprises in the current year, right? And if you look at the PMIs, right, China obviously led it, but US, China, European Union, all are showing a V-shaped recovery in the PMI, right? Vaccination, 17 million doses, the world across 17 million. You see, United States, China, Israel, all the countries have kind of escalated their vaccination role. So the efficiency rate of the various vaccines, you know, the Moderna's, Pfizer, and Gamaleya from the Russia, these are at 90%. Oxford AstraZeneca, which is coming to India, is about 70% in terms of vaccination, right? So this synchronous recovery, right, is where both developed markets and emerging markets are going to see. Normally, in the early days, you used to say first developed market has to grow, then emerging market will play a catch-up. But this time, because everybody fell, I think there's going to be a synchronous recovery. This is very, very important because you will actually see that the GDP growth, when they are synchronizing, then there'll be a simultaneous move to equity across the world, right? So the blue wave was, of course, a mixed surprise for the markets. Government interference in monetary policy, which was high under Trump, is going to come to an end. No narratives around trade war, Democrats said control will all be positive for growth, right? And dollars weakening, we refer to in the summary there, right? While weakening against the deficit rises, dollar will weaken, right? So what we expect is a supply-driven soft crude and a China-led metals rally broadly in terms of this. The Chinese steel consumption is, as you can see, is growing. Chinese aluminum demand is growing. Chinese copper demand is growing. So when China recovers, you'll find all of these factors come and help the metal cycle, right? And crude continues to be hovering at the same levels. There's not much increase in the crude prices despite a global recovery. So we think a soft crude is going to continue, and this is the barrels of supply. So Saudi Arabia, OPEC, whatever they do, ultimately they've kept the supply constant. They're not let it drop for the price to rise. They're not let it rise for the price to drop, right? China credit flows and metal price movements. We just spoke about it, right? You can see all the metal prices are sharply upward, right? And the interesting thing in these metal prices to remember is that they're all London Metal Exchange, right? So this price, even in India, so you see India metal demand doesn't drive metal price. It's the London Metal Exchange price which prevails even in India. All contracts are only against the LME price. So that's why you will see the stock market action here, because earnings goes up even if quantity is not going up from demand. Okay, and this is the $29 trillion more of liquidity is expected to be pumped in by December of 22. So no worry about liquidity shortage or tapering or any such thing, right? So the balance sheet is also going to expand of Fed, which is note printing, right? One is liquidity, one is how they expand the balance sheet, right? So if you see that Fed, ECB, Bank of Japan, these are the three main things work on for 90% of world liquidity. And all of them you can see are at varying levels of growth. And I'm trying to compare here with 2009 to 13, which was the previous crisis that we saw, right? Manufacturing PMIs, we saw the slide earlier. I'm just reinforcing that here. And month on month, if you see, except for Mexico, Russia to some extent, every month on month, 89% of the world economies have seen the PMI increase from the previous month. So which is that the growth is catching momentum, right? And Chinese growth recovery, of course, remains strong. And US also, in terms of retail sales and all that, you can see those numbers. And coming to India now, you see that GST collections, even yesterday's number not yet captured in the month of January also has seen a higher number of well over a lakh and 10,000, 20,000 crores. Unemployment back to pre-COVID levels. Good news for us. India's growth recovery also, exports, GST collection, two-wheeler sales, passenger vehicles, power demand, rate, all rising, right? And so if you look at the economic recovery index, Jeffries calculates this, it's come back to the 100% of pre-COVID levels, right? And though the external shocks have slowed the growth, India is in a steady path. You see the 5-year average of GDP and growth, whatever be the thing, if you put a parallel line to it, it is coming in line. So that's good news for our country. And we think that this way, if the projection happens, right, what we are saying is that needed number of quarters needed to reach 2019 GDP level. So for India, we think we need 9 quarters, whereas for Italy, we need 20 quarters. So clearly, India and South Korea are among the fastest growing thing in terms of getting back to their old levels of GDP growth, right? So as a result, you can see the step increase in India's GDP percentage over Y, and we are at about 9.5, which is what the budget has taken into account. I'll come to that when we talk about the budget, right? So this is the V-shaped recovery, and we think that this quarter itself will be positive, January, February, March. Then April, May, June will show 17% growth because last year was minus 23%. So it's not like genuine there. The base effect is coming, and then it tapers down because the subsequent bases went up. But overall, next year should be a positive 9.5 to 10% GDP growth, right? And the COVID also, we continue to show among the better countries in the world in managing our COVID situation. So this is the fatality rate drop and the recovery rate rising, right? So overall, if you see, and RBI has been fully supportive by creating the liquidity. So significant growth as a percentage of GDP today, RBI has taken it to a lifetime high of 30% of GDP, right? And the real rates have turned below the long-term average, right? In fact, negative. If you take the inflation, and yeah, naturally at 3% interest rate and a 4.5% inflation, it has to be negative, right? So we are actually seeing negative interest rates in terms of real rates, right? This, we are all aware that the RBI announced the framework, KV Kamath Committee, and it's going to benefit 66%. So the banking sector's good news started with this Kamath Committee's recommendation coming into play. So the expected stress in the banking system, as you can see, we expected from various banks to all trend down. So we have compared September 20 with December 19. Here, September 20 numbers are high, but the provision coverage has also been increased, right? So another one on COVID provisions. So Bandhan has had a high 2.6% COVID provision. Whereas all other banks are hovering between 1 to 2%. SBI, Kotak, and HDFC have been the best of the lot in terms of providing for COVID, right? Collection efficiency of large banks, right? So if you see here, 96, 97% HDFC Bank, SBI is 97%, ICICI is what 94, and all the rest are in the mid 90s. So very good collection efficiency they are showing in the September quarter. Right? Sorry. So we think that structural positives were falling well into place before the budget on housing because of PLI and because of the National Investment Program. So you see housing and real estate, the affordability of the house, home loan payment to income ratio, or what we call affordability ratio, has come down to 27, right? So last seen in 2004, 2003, 4, it was at this level. So it's among the best ever time to buy a house today, right? This is just a calculation to show you. If you look down there and see the EMI to income ratio from 51% in 2007, it has come to 29% today. And a property price to income ratio has also come from 6.3 down to 4.4. In fact, it makes sense to buy and rent a house because the yield gap between the post-tax interest rate and the rental yield was at 7% in 2012. Today it's down to 3%, right? So that 3% is what you have to meet from your pocket. Over a period of a lifetime, the appreciation of the real estate, we cover that. So even for buying a house for renting out purposes, the situation is now very conducive. So housing sector set for a boost well before the budget. Similarly, in the PLI schemes, right, domestic value addition from incremental sales versus annual investment as a percentage of GDP, right? These are a game changer for Indian manufacturing, and the PLI schemes will achieve what the Make in India initiatives could not. Right? So if you see here from 22 to 27, the 5 years program for the PLI, 13 PLI schemes have been introduced, and you can see how the value addition from incremental sales, because the PLI is payable only on the value addition part. You can't just import raw material and claim the PLI. So there is the Indian economy's real game changer, PLI-based recovery, right? Which are the sectors where they have done this? Mobile, autos, battery, food, pharma, textile, telecom, and others. So this is the set of the PLI schemes. $150 billion of new sales, and 70 billion of that will be a domestic value addition. So phenomenal numbers. You have to multiply these by 75 to get the real impact in rupees crores. So it is additional to the National Infrastructure Program, right? Well before the budget, we're talking about all of these factors, right? So if you look at it, where is the government spending the capex, right? Look at the dark 24% and 18% are roads and on energy, right? So because these are also the multiplier effect in terms of labor, employment generation, and a multiplier effect in the economy. So energy, urban, roads, and railways account for 70% of the projected infra. And as you know, in the budget, roads and railways were given a special allocation, right? We'll come to that. So tax rates, I think this slide I've seen over and over again. We are among the best in the world on tax. So FDI, I think we are very well set to receive FDI. These are doing business rankings. We think with these reforms in the last 6 months and what the budget is announced, we think it will be a sharp rise in these rankings even more, right? And China versus India comparison, you know, China's is an aging, decreasing policy. India's for the next 30 years is still rising, right? COVID has helped foreigners to realize that you can't over depend on China. So this is the set of people who are saying we want to create additional capacity outside China or substitute China, depending on that, which is where the China plus one is what the strategy is called. And India is getting ready for that, right? So this is, again, the same thing in terms of the intentions of people to relocate out of China and moving to the markets and the macro, right? So if you look at the weak dollar has seen alongside an emerging market outperformance. So what you've done is the DXY, which is the dollar versus all other currencies, right? That is the thing, that inverted curve. And if you look at the SPX and the MXCF, right? What you are seeing here is that the MSCI emerging markets index is outperformed when the dollar index is inverted. So every instance of dollar weakness is led to phase of EM outperformance. You recollect right at the beginning of the presentation, I said the dollar is set to continue to be weak because of the twin deficits in US continuing to rise. So you can expect that emerging markets will tend to outperform the S&P, and because of that, India's position also in the emerging market will be up for grabs, right? So, and the second thing is that the dollar index is also tracked by the flows. So one is the market performance. The second is the flows. As the dollar gets weaker and weaker, the more the flows flow out. So this is a Bloomberg's emerging market capital flow proxy in blue and the dollar index. Can you see? how the capital flow tracks. As the dollar gets weaker, more and more money counts. So I've given you more and more ammunition to say why more money is going to come to emerging markets and why emerging markets are going to outperform. And so that will itself lead to a virtuous cycle, right? So globally, liquidity is said to lead to an earnings uptick, right? So this is also again by history. Whenever liquidity is pumped in, not only do the stock markets rise, but actual earnings also rise because they save on interest costs because the low liquidity, interest rates go down, but their business also, because demand gets boosted due to liquidity, all companies also see a rise in their top line. So I think that's where the correlation between liquidity and earnings has been quite high. And this correlation here is refers to global liquidity and Indian earnings. So there's a very, very clear correlation between the two. You'll say, what is the correlation? Why should that? But that's what I said, because the global liquidity leads to surplus of liquidity. Companies can, for example, tap the capital markets for capital, don't have to depend on debt, brings down their interest cost, and all of that is reflected in this kind of a correlation chart over a long period of time, right? From November 97 to now is what we have tracked, right? And because of the debt crisis and the disruption, these in the past they've got subdued, right? If you look at the Nifty, defaults, disruption, and others put together have made the Nifties come down. So this, as we go forward and we see that this situation gets better, what are the defaults? The bad debts, the ILFS and corporates, that seems to have peaked. Next, disruption came to the pharma from US FDA, pricing pressure, and telecom due to Jio's aggressive strategy. We believe those are now well behind us in terms of the future, and so those overhang on earnings will be down. And post-COVID, when we look at the NSE 500 companies, net worth X financials, debt X financials, and debt equity ratio, all three show strong improvement. What it's telling you is corporate India has used the downturn to either they passed on the pressure to the informal sector, or they have tightened their belt and cut costs and repaid debt from the cash they have got. So that's what we are saying here. So you see the net worth has gone up, right? Because the equity markets have also supported, but they have reduced their debt, and hence the debt equity ratio has come down for the overall average NSE 500. So we're not only talking about large caps here, we're talking about pretty much the cream of the stock market across large, mid, and small caps, right? And the other thing is that analysts are always late in capturing a recovery in earnings. So whenever you see that the consensus earnings and the actual earnings, right? If the actual earnings comes better, then the stock prices rise even faster. You've seen this quarter upon quarter on quarter. So what this is telling you is that analysts are behind the curve because they are still hesitant to project a very sharp V, but actual results come and surprise them. So if you see, then they revise their thing. So these revisions naturally lead to a revision of forecasted price, correct? So that's where the stock market rally is getting driven, because consistently earnings is beating estimates. Forget about comparing YOY, forget about comparing sequential quarter. Fact is, what is an analyst saying this earnings will be and what comes out is the critical thing, which is what this is showing you. That's what I've written here on the right hand side, right? So Sensex's consensus EPS growth trend, right? What are we saying here, right? If you look at this, 2021 EPS was minus 600, 22, 22, 22. So what you can see in the right, we are saying that companies were quick to cut costs and to protect margins, and they use the buoyancy to raise capital, reduce the tail end risk, and provide more capital for growth. So that's why the same story as the previous slide is getting repeated in terms of the forecast EPS going on changing. All right. What are the risks here? And that's where in the lead up to the budget, I wanted to speak about this, is that if the COVID infections spike up, one, and if dollar strengthens instead of weakness, two, if the rupee weakens, right, that's the same as dollar strength roughly. If commodity prices rally very fast, then what will happen? Commodity price lead to inflation here. Commodity price could also lead to reallocation of capital away from India into Brazil, Russia, and other countries. If you have a coming season, there's a bad monsoon, you need to watch out for that. It could also lead to commodity inflation. And if the US inflation rises very fast, so Fed don't do the liquidity that they are promising to do and cut it back. And if RBI suddenly decides that no, growth is now coming back, I'm going to focus on inflation, naturally they will try to pull back the liquidity. So these are all the potential risks. We're just highlighting them so that we keep track of what's happening, right? Coming to the stock markets now. Stock markets, as you know, Nifty's earnings has shown a spike up. The longer term trend of Nifty earnings from 8 to 18 only 5%. Now it's about 3.5%. But next year, from 501 for this March to 685, that's the V-shaped recovery playing out. So in terms of valuations, all the three indices are trading over what is called their long-term average, and some have in fact gone past the previous peak. Why? Because the earnings have not yet happened. Market is a lead indicator. It is forecasting that the earnings will happen, and it has gone up, discounting that earning, right? So that's exactly what you see here. From December 17 was the previous peak. Nifty was at 18 PE. Currently, it's at 26 PE, 1 year forward. So that's an 8 expansion of PE in the Nifty. Whereas the mid cap and small cap have still not reached the previous peak. They have risen sharply. So 22 versus 24, still 1.8 away from the peak. And small cap is at 20 versus 19, which is roughly at the same as the peak. Because of this differential rise, of FII driven rise, you are seeing that still the mid cap and the small cap index in terms of forward are at a discount to the Nifty. Right? So I think that gives you a good summary of the current situation, right? And this is reflected in another way. If you look at the same thing from December 17, look at the returns of the Nifty, NSE mid cap and small cap. 133% versus 98 versus 70. That same discount is being reflected as a different metric here, right? So if you then look at it and say that this March last year, because of the correction and the fact that Indian economy's recovery is nowhere, if you treat that as the beginning of the next bull cycle, that means we had a very short bear cycle from December 17 to March 20, and then if you treat this, time will tell whether what we are saying is right. You can see that all the three indices from that period of low have roughly risen equally. Whereas in a true bull market, in a true GDP bull economy, the mid and small caps outperform the large caps by multiple times. Take a look at phase one. 559% versus 934% versus 1400%. Phase three, the other bull market, 61 versus 192 versus 226. So if you then look at it, if the economic recovery is really going through, you are going to see mid and small caps outperform the large cap. But we have to wait and see that. But I think that gives you a correct summary in terms of the valuation discount relative and the earnings growth expectation, right? And then if you look at it, FII flows are the ones which have been consistently supporting, right? In December also, we got $7 billion. And if you look at this, this tells you that if you compare all the developed markets, Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and India, and look at it at the number which says FYTD, the last row, which is April to now, and CYTD, which is January to now. Looking at that, not this January, this is for last year calendar year. If you look at it there, every single country almost has got a negative flow except India. So the attractiveness of India to a foreigner, I think, is clearly reflected in this chart. And if you can see quarter to date, month to date, week to date, everywhere India has got positive flows, not necessarily true. Recently, Taiwan has started getting some flows, as you can see, right? This is the favorite chart of mine, where we take the yield difference between 10-year GSEC and Nifty earnings yield. Now, what is Nifty earnings yield? It's the opposite of the P ratio. So if you say P ratio is 20, opposite of P ratio is 1 by 20, which is what? 5.5%, right? So then you take the difference between the 10-year GSEC lead, right? So the Nifty earnings yield is calculated as 100 divided by the P ratio. So it is 100 divided by 20 is at about 5%. Today is about 27, so it's at 4%. So the gap between the 10-year GSEC yield and this yield tells you that the market is bound for a rally. Because if somebody is putting his money in this, GSEC is considered the risk-free, default-free. Government of India will always pay my money. Equity market should give you a better return than the risk-free, right? But if that yield gap turns negative, it means that equity market is underpriced and poised for a bounce back. Is exactly what the graph at the end is showing, right? That correction upwards is happening, right? Domestic mutual funds have been net sellers. Why? Because customers have been redeeming money. And second, because the rally driven by the FIIs has been focused on just 20-25 stocks, too polarized for mutual funds to take a risk. So they have had to stay away, and naturally, then they have underperformed the benchmarks because the benchmarks have been driven by FII. Right. This is just the international. Last year's returns are not relevant. 2020 also, if you see, every market was a positive return, including India. Right. India's premium over the world and over the emerging market on the left-hand side graph, if you see, had dropped sharply. That's why FIS felt India was attractive value. Now it has started going up, but yet to reach the previous peak. Right-hand side is world market comparison. We'll just skip it for time being. The other thing which has been driving money into India, the left-hand side graph is the PE graph, the right-hand side graph is the price to book value graph. So as you can see, on a PE ratio, we are expensive, but on a price to book ratio, we are below our long-term average. Why? Because Indian capacity has dropped. So book values, the price has actually dropped. So now this is telling you that Indian economy can easily bounce back without much capex needed, because already the capacity has been created. So that gives a positive, because the rise in earnings will not be impacted by rise in interest costs and depreciation. So EPS will grow faster than the top line. That's another reason that India has been attractive to, right? Now let's move to the key topic for today, right? The budget, right? So what is the budget? Just some headline thought processes, and we'll go into detail in a little bit, right? So the budget, first, all the right narratives and the fiscal math for support they give. More importantly, for next year, they've seen some conservative receipt assumptions, government's receipts. I'll show you that in detail. But another thing is transparency. This Food Corporation of India, being a PSU, they used to keep it outside the balance sheet. The government never used to include it in the fiscal deficit. And everybody knew it was open secret. But this time the government has said, no, let's go. So the expenditure growth is 808% higher only because they have decided to move this and reflect it correctly as a part of the government's borrowing, which should have been the case many years ago. We did not do it. Better late than never. But this was a great positive for FIIs. But finally, government is recognizing, and with that, the fiscal deficit is on the new glide path that Nirmala Ji has announced. Right? So actually, we believe that FY21 and 22, we would see lower deficits than their target. Okay. Debt market, obviously government borrowing 80,000 crores and then 12 lakh crores next year. But still, despite that, I think the reaction has been well contained. There is reaction, but well contained. Transparency we just spoke about, which is good for the ratings. And balance, it's a pro-growth budget with very little to dislike. Because lots of people have been asking me questions saying, so what's so great about the budget? The fact that there was very little to dislike the budget itself was a big positive. So now we'll look at the math. So each line by line we'll go through here. So please pay attention. So the topmost line is the absolute GDP of the country, right? That's in lakh crores. You can either call it trillion rupees or call it lakh crores. The same thing means. So what is the next line in dark blue? So FY20 BE means financial year 2019-20. Last year's budget estimate, what it was. Then the actual for last year. It's just for comparison. I don't think we need to look, but just so that you have a sense of it. Then for this year's budget, last year when Nirmala Ji put the budget out, what was the estimate she gave? Next is FY21 RE, that is a revised estimate. What revision? Actual that happened. You still called RE and not actual because you still have 2 months to go. No? So it can't be actual, it's revised estimate. Now the FY20 is budget estimate, right? So either you can compare with last year's budget estimate or you can compare with the almost semi-actual of this year versus next year. So the last two columns are probably the key. Now, there are various heads here. We'll come to that. But on the right-hand side table, what we have shown is the growth YOY, the year on year. Right? So there comes my first point. So last year, since we had a negative GDP growth, total GDP of the country came down from 224,000 crores to 194. So 30,000 crores our economy shrunk. This is nominal, okay? It includes inflation. So such a situation was there. So next year, all she's saying is going to go back to the previous year, what we thought it would be. So effectively, they have shifted the goalpost by 1 year. So last year in the budget, what India was supposed to achieve, this year in the budget, they are saying they'll achieve. That's number one. Number two, What is the percentage increase? 14.4%. Please see the last on the right. This is a key number. Finance minister has been conservative in projecting only 14% GDP growth. Now you say, what is 14%? It's nominal GDP growth. It includes inflation. If you take an inflation is hovering at 5%, you're actually putting only 9.5%. As we saw earlier, our expectation was 9.5%. So she has not projected some phenomenal 20% growth in GDP. She has stuck to a conservative number of GDP growth. So that's the first line taken care of. Then what you're going to do, you're going to see revenue and you're going to see expenditure, and the difference is the deficit. Because India, as a country, the expenditure is always more than the revenue. Now, in revenue receipts, there's tax, there's non-tax, and there's capital. That is your disinvestment and all of that, right? 3x. So non-tax is a very small number. Let's not worry about it too much. Now you look at the tax collections, right? So from the actual of 13,445, it is projected to 15,454, which is a 15% growth in tax collection. If 14% GDP is going to grow 14.5%, expecting 15% growth in tax collection is not undue. So again, a very realistic number. Next, non-tax we'll ignore. Look at the capital receipts. As you know, last year itself, they had projected 2.25 lakh crore, right? You saw the B there, because they have put LIC and this and then all big grand plans. None of those succeeded. So actually, they ended up only getting 46,000 crores in through some kind of a disinvestment. This year, they're projecting 1.88 lakh crore. Now, we'll say they were 2.25, they were asking less. Why? I think they want to be realistic. So that's another thing I like about the budget. I thought this just to, what do you call, window dress the numbers of the budget. But she didn't do that. 1880 is less than what last year she wanted to do. And the homework for this 2250 happened right through the year. Just that they didn't implement it. So I am reasonably confident that this 1880 number can be exceeded this year after many, many budgets there, but they have been conservative in terms of projecting 1.8 lakh crores. That's the income part of it. So overall income, the receipts, is not right to call income because government does cash accounting. They don't do profit and loss accounting, right? So the total receipts are 19.7 lakh crores, which is a 23% growth over the previous year. And the previous year we saw a negative because tax collections also got hit last year due to COVID. Now we see expenditure, and this is probably the more important part of the. So what are we doing on expenditure? So actually last year's budget, they said revenue will spend only 26,301. But they actually ended up doing 30. Why? Coronavirus crisis, they had to do some giveaways, increase the NREGA allocation, increase all those things. So that is where that was ahead of their expectation. Market thought they should spend much, much more, but they kept it careful to only this much, right? And this year they are keeping it flat. That is the wonderful part of the budget, is that the 23% increase in the receipts, they are not spending it on revenue expenditure. So revenue expenditure is in fact minus 3%. Capital expenditure from last year itself, the government, look at it, in a troubled year, they didn't reduce their capex. They went from 4.1 lakh crore to 4.4 lakh crore. Small increase. But despite the thing, they did not tighten the belt, cut on capex. Very good thing. But this now is going to go up by 1.2 lakh crores from 4.4 to 5.55. So that's 26% increase in capital expenditure. So that's the beauty of the budget. The reason foreigners are liking this budget, the reason the stock market liking the budget lies exactly in this slide. That the government has put a conservative revenue implication, a conservative GDP implication, but what they've done is that the quality of the expenditure, they have significantly improved, right? So leaving aside that welfare, social, this, that, they have actually come and said that I will spend on CapEx. Why CapEx? Because the multiplier effect of CapEx lasts for 3 to 4 years in terms of the GDP, but the revenue lasts for just 1 year or 1.5 years at the max. So for the future GDP growth of the country, this is probably the single most important thing where the government intends to spend the money has been clearly put down, right? So as a result, the fiscal deficit and the revenue deficit are in front of you. So we are actually, last year we had a 9.5% fiscal deficit. Actuals, we are projecting 6.8. That's another reason why the market likes this budget, because this 6.8 is a very wide from the 3.5 what we had earlier thought, right? So taking on the rating agencies to say, yes, I am going to spend money to grow. And why would the rating agencies be kind about it? The expectation is that because you're spending on capex, future revenue will come and help it. That's why from year 6.8, she has given a glide path to 4.5 by 2026. So this is a fairly smart way of managing. And I think this budget math is probably one of the single biggest reasons for the stock market participants to take it positively. I think this has been a brilliant budget in that sense, in terms of the balancing act and saying the right things to all the stakeholders. And within this, if you look at the tax, right, without increasing the tax rates, they are only projecting a growth along with the GDP growth. So just GDP grows, everybody's income should grow at that level, and you're only going to pay that much more tax. So there is no fear of a COVID cess, the fear of LTCG being increased. The market was correcting a few days before the budget because this fear. They said, if government's fiscal deficit is going to be so bad, is the government going to hit taxes on the soft targets like the capital market participants and all of those FIIs? They've stayed away. I think the protection nature of the budget protected people's post-tax income in this budget. I think this slide itself, you have seen a thing. The same set of numbers, but comparing as a percentage of GDP is in the next. Left-hand side numbers are the same. The right-hand side numbers tell you percentage of GDP. So what we are saying is that the revenue is 8% of the GDP, right? And to our total, that is the tax plus non-tax. Whereas capital receipts are 0.8%, so totally it comes to 9%. Whereas the expenditure, right, even with this higher expenditure, capex is only 2.5% of GDP, 13%, but that 13% is down from 15% of last year. I think that's the way, also another way to look at these numbers, right? Now the breakup for Q&A, I've got these slides of the breakup of the taxes, right? And if you look at where they are expecting direct taxes, right? If you see 22%, they are expecting a rise. As incomes rise, people go into higher tax slabs, corporations will go to higher tax slabs, right? So that's the reason why you are seeing that direct taxes have been projected at 22%, but excise duty, they are taking a 7% cut, right? Because the last year they had the petrol cess and all of that came and raised their thing. This year they are not projecting that. So they are projected a 7% drop in excise, 21% rise in this, and in services, which is a very small amount. The 10% looks big, but it's not a very big number. So total tax collection, they're expecting 17, but they're going to give away to the states a significant portion. So the center will be left with only a 15%. If you see here, against 20% collection on the tax, excise is going to come and they're going to give away in the GST excise some collections, but they're also giving away a part of it to the states, right? So that's the another way to look at this breakup of revenues, right? And the same thing, percentage of GDP. I mean, these are all just different ways of looking at it. So if you have any questions on these, we can look at it later, right? Right. And if you look at the budgeted support, right, Ministry of Railways and the infrastructure thing, so you saw that, right? Ministry of Railways, they're given 1 lakh crore of the 5.5 lakh crore of the capex, and balance is the, excluding railways, the other capex expenditure. You know that for roads, Tamil Nadu is getting about 1 lakh crore, Calcutta, Bengal is getting about 25,000 crores, Kerala is getting some money, and all of that, right? So same again expressed in different way. This is the borrowings. So the current year borrowings are at 12.8 lakh crore. Next year they are projected at 12 lakh crore. Same flat as last year, right? But like I said, the debt market has taken not too badly to this number, because remember, this borrowing, last year they projected only 7.8 lakh crore. They ended up borrowing 4 lakh crore more than that to finance. And of this, they have not fully borrowed. Next 2 months, they are going to borrow 80,000 crores, but they're keeping it flat at the elevated level of borrowing. They're not going to be able to bring it down. Small savings, they're projecting a small reduction because of the interest rate scenario and other ways to analyze the budget, right? So the same numbers again expressed as a percentage of GDP, just for interest. To summarize the budget thing, so we believe that the 21-22 is a pro-growth budget with conservative receipt assumptions clubbed with an appreciable increase in spending. It sees repurposing of revenue spends into capex and onboards the off-budget item, increasing the transparency of the fiscal accounts. In a welcome relief, budget has no negatives in the form of additional cess or tax. This itself can be considered positive. Now, with the budget out of the way, the focus now falls on the monetary policy that's coming on this Friday. Right? The budget sees a clear shift in focus on increasing capital spending to drive the economy while kickstarting investment. And we saw also a clear weaning away from subsidies and repurposing revenue spends and move towards greater transparency. So in this context, our portfolios, we will be fairly diversified because the balanced growth expected in the next few years and the broad-based recovery. Right? The budget shows increased clarity on the financing of the capex through monetization of operational infrastructure, selling non-core assets and privatization. Finance Minister made a mention of all of these. The very important thing is the creation of a new IDBI or an ICICI, which is what is a DFI. As you know, all these started there and they went and merged them into our banks, right? As a universal bank. And then honestly, their asset liability mismatch, NPAs, has been a tough challenge. The government has recognized that that was not right. They're creating a new development. They're putting in 20,000 crores as capital. They will raise capital from the market, stock markets, maybe another 20,000 or 25,000 crores. So with a 50,000 crore capital base, it can borrow 10x or 9x from the market as debt. So about 5 lakh crores is what this new DFI is going to be able to finance infrastructure. Plus, the finance minister also mentioned in a post-press conference that she is open to the private sector after the government does this, also setting up DFIs. So somebody who wants to set up a 10, 20-year financing, development financing in the private sector, government would encourage. So clearly paying attention to the financing side of it, but not everything is taken by the government, but spread across the market participants, right? So the combination of PSU privatization, recapitalization, and the asset reconstruction, asset management companies for stressed assets will bring the release of management bandwidth for the banks. Transparency will be there in the decision making, and the resolution process will get help, right? So eventually, this will help the PSU banks to raise equity capital from the stock market, right? So this summarizes our thing. I think I will not go through this. I think essentially what I have said is lengthy. I'll leave the slide here for just a minute so you can quickly read it. The only point which I didn't mention was that rural India remains strong on the back of a good monsoon, double-digit Kharif procurement growth, and focused government spends, right? The other things I think we have spoken about, PLI, the China Plus One SWIFT, and the investment cycle, right? So what we believe is that CapEx and employment are set to revamp the manufacturing landscapes. COVID has pushed India into a phase of formalization, right? It had resisted during demonetization, but now it has forced, right? The unorganized sector to the organized sector. E-commerce related firms and their financial technology firms have disrupted the space. So whatever they call it, a K-shaped recovery. Okay, you write a K like this, right? And housing, PLI scheme, global demand recovery are expected to aid the twin engine of investment and consumption, pushing up growth, construction, manufacturing, exports. Synchronous stimulus measures across the world, vaccination drives, Democrat-led US, weak dollar, but contained commodities and continued liquidity are all key global events that we see play out. Right? So thank you.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.